The year was 1884, and the wind across Clearwater Valley carried the kind of silence that made men believe the world had forgotten them. Snow lay deep that winter, a white hush over the land, and the sun rose pale as old parchment. Out on the valley's edge stood a ranch, weather-beaten, half-buried in frost, where a man named Shwohn McAllister lived alone. At 31, he was a man carved out of solitude, his back strong from labor, and his voice rough from disuse. The folks in town called him the man who spoke to the wind, for he was often seen standing in his fields at dusk, staring toward the horizon as though waiting for someone who would never return. 10 years earlier, a woman had left him. No fight, no farewell, just the emptiness of a note that said she couldn't live with silence. He'd buried his laughter that day and built his fences higher, keeping out not only the world, but also the ache of memory. Now his only company was Daisy, the chestnut mare who followed his every step, and the whistle of the wind slipping through broken shutters. Each day passed like the one before. Dawn chores, cold meals, dusk prayers whispered to a God he wasn't sure still listened. That morning, the horizon shimmered with a faint outline of movement. Shwohn narrowed his eyes, thinking at first it was a mirage, the sun playing tricks on weary eyes. But then came the sharp echo of wheels in the snow, a coach, struggling along the frozen road. Its horses snorted, breath rising in ghostly plumes. The driver, wrapped in a threadbare coat, cursed as one wheel splintered against a hidden stone. The vehicle lurched to a halt near Shwohn's fence, its door creaking open. A woman stepped down, her blue dress frayed, a small trunk clutched against her chest. Her cheeks were windburned, her shoes caked in mud. She looked as though she'd walked out of a painting left too long in the rain, faded, fragile, but still full of something stubbornly alive. The driver tipped his hat toward Shwohn. "Sorry to trouble you, sir. This here lady says she's come for her husband, some rancher named McAllister." He grinned without humor. "Guess that'd be you, eh?" Shwohn stared, confusion furrowing the lines between his brows. "I ain't ordered a wife," he said flatly. The woman blanched. "No, there must be a mistake." Her voice trembled, but her back remained straight. "I was bound for Hollow Creek. The postmaster must have given me the wrong direction." Her fingers tightened on the trunk handle. "The driver says the pass ahead's frozen. He can't go further till spring." The driver shrugged, clearly done with the matter, and turned his horses. "You'll have to sort it out yourselves," he muttered before disappearing down the road, leaving only the whisper of hooves and the rising wind. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The woman, Rhea Calloway, as she later introduced herself, stood small against the vastness of snow, her breath a thin wisp of steam. She didn't plead, didn't weep, though her lips were cracked from cold. "If you'll allow me to wait here until the road's clear," she said softly, "I'll repay the kindness when I can." Shwohn studied her face, the weariness, the thread of dignity stitched through fear, and nodded once. "Cabin's warm. You can stay." Inside, the room glowed with firelight, simple but steady. She set her trunk by the door and sank near the hearth, extending trembling hands toward the flames. "You live alone here?" she asked after a while. 10 years. Her eyes flicked around the room, the tools lined by the wall, the unmade bed, the Bible on the table with dust thick on its cover. "It must be quiet," she said. "Quiet keeps things honest." He meant it as a truth, not a wall, but she nodded like she understood the difference. Later, she insisted on cooking supper. The stew was thin yet comforting, filled with small gestures that felt almost like prayer. The way she stirred, the way she served him first, as though the act of caring for another was a habit she'd never unlearned. When he thanked her, his voice came out hoarse, unused to gratitude. Over the next days, Rhea moved about the house with gentle order. She washed linens, mended a curtain, and once, humming softly, placed a wild sprig of pine in a glass jar by the window. Shwohn found himself pausing mid-task to listen, to watch. Her presence didn't fill the silence, it softened it. Still, whispers reached the ranch long before spring thawed the valley. Mrs. Eloise Harrow, the postmaster's wife, told anyone who'd listen that McAllister's taken in a stray, pretending to be his bride. In Clearwater, rumor was as certain as the tide. Rhea heard it one morning in the store when two women stopped talking the moment she entered. Their eyes said more than their silence. That evening, when she returned to the ranch, her shoulders were rigid beneath her shawl. "They think I deceived you," she said quietly. "That I came here to trap you." She tried to smile, but it faltered. "I can leave in the morning. It isn't right for me to cause harm." Shwohn didn't answer at once. The firelight caught the sharp planes of his face, the faint scar along his jaw, a remnant of another winter, another mistake. Finally he said, "Harm's already been done by smaller things than kindness." She frowned slightly, uncertain if that was permission or forgiveness. He stood, crossed the door, and pulled his coat tight. "You stay till the thaw," he said, his voice low but firm. "Let them talk." The following days passed under the heavy hush of snow. Shwohn worked longer hours outside, building fences he didn't need, fixing gates already mended. Inside, Rhea baked bread, her hands raw from the cold, her spirit caught between shame and gratitude. At night, she'd sit by the window, watching snowflakes drift like ashes, whispering something too soft for him to hear. Once he found her weeping quietly, a letter unfolded in her lap. "It's from the agency," she explained, wiping her cheeks. "They wrote that the man who was to marry me, he's changed his mind." Her voice broke, and she folded the paper tightly, as though to hide the wound. "Seems I'm no one's responsibility now." Shwohn stood beside her, uncertain. Words had never served him well. After a long pause, he said only, "This land's rough, but it don't turn away what survives the storm." It wasn't comfort, but something deeper, a kind of recognition. As the days shortened, their unspoken bond grew. He began leaving small things by her place at the table, a slice of apple pie, his mother's old shawl, gestures clumsy but sincere. She answered with care of her own, mending his gloves, softening the edges of his silence. The loneliness that had once filled the cabin began to retreat, inch by inch, like a tide pulling back. One night, a blizzard struck hard. Wind roared against the windows, shaking the walls. Rhea rose to check the latch on the door, but it burst open with a violent gust. Snow swirled inside, cold biting her skin. Shwohn rushed forward, slamming it shut, the force sending them both stumbling. For a breathless second, they stood inches apart, the storm's howl fading behind them. The fire flickered, painting gold across her hair. He reached out, almost without meaning, to brushing snow from her cheek. She looked up, eyes wide, the air between them trembling. "Mr. McAllister," she whispered. He stepped back, his hand falling to his side, voice rough with something unsaid. "Get some rest. Storm's just starting." But when he turned away, she saw it, the faintest crack in his armor, a shadow of longing too deep to name. And though neither spoke another word that night, both understood the truth they feared most, that two broken lives had begun to thaw, and once the thaw began, nothing in Clearwater Valley would ever be the same again. The wind had teeth that winter, sharper than any blade. It howled across the valley like an old ghost reclaiming its home, gnawing through wood and will alike. For weeks, the sun never showed its full face, only a gray half-light filtered through the clouds. Inside the cabin, the air thickened with the quiet rhythm of survival. Rhea rose before dawn to stoke the fire, her hands cracked and reddened by frost. Shwohn worked from first light till dark, mending fences buried in snow, cutting wood until his breath came out like smoke from a wounded animal. They said little, but every glance between them carried the weight of unspoken things, grief, gratitude, the fragile thread of something beginning to stir. One morning, the sound of hooves shattered the stillness. Rhea looked up from kneading bread as Shwohn stepped to the window. A figure approached through the snow, his coat black as pitch against the white world. Behind him, a mule dragged a sled heavy with supplies. Shwohn opened the door, letting in a rush of cold. "Morning," the stranger called, tipping his hat. "Name's Ezra Holt, bringing post and trade from town." Ezra was younger than Shwohn, maybe 28. With quick eyes and a smile too easy for winter. He lingered longer than most traders, his charm slipping into the room like sunlight through a cracked door. Rhea offered him stew. He took it with thanks, telling stories that made her laugh. something Shwohn hadn't heard in years. The sound unsettled him. That night, when Ezra left, his laughter echoed faintly in the wind, and Shwohn felt a strange hollow beneath his ribs. Over the next weeks, Ezra returned often under the excuse of checking the road or delivering letters. He brought Rhea a scarf once, blue as spring sky. She accepted it politely, though her eyes flicked toward Shwohn, searching his face for something, disapproval, perhaps, or permission. He gave her neither. He only nodded, saying gruffly, "It'll keep you warm." But that night, he sat long after she'd gone to bed, staring at the flames until they blurred, as if trying to remember when warmth had ever come so easily. The snow deepened. Days blurred into nights, nights into the same haunting silence. Then, one evening, Rhea found Shwohn outside by the barn, his sleeve torn and blood seeping from a gash across his arm. "A wire snapped," he muttered, trying to brush it off, but she caught his wrist, her touch firm. "Sit," she ordered, her voice trembling not from fear but urgency. In the lamplight, she cleaned the wound with snow-melted water, her fingers careful, her breath close enough for him to feel. When she tied the bandage, she hesitated, his pulse steady beneath her palm. For a moment, the world shrank to the space between them. "Why do you speak to the wind?" she asked quietly, breaking the silence. He looked up, startled. "Who told you that?" "The women in town." Her voice softened. "They say you talk to ghosts." He gave a faint, humorless smile. "Maybe I do. Maybe it's the only thing that ever listens." Her eyes lingered on his face, seeing not the stoic rancher, but the loneliness etched deep beneath. "Then let it listen to both of us," she whispered. It was a fragile peace, but peace nonetheless, until the night Ezra returned with urgent news. The thaw had come early, rivers swelling, ice breaking loose. He'd found a stagecoach overturned by Clearwater Bridge, its cargo scattered, passengers missing. "We'll need men to help search," he said, eyes flicking to Shwohn. "Could use you out there." Shwohn hesitated. The storm still clawed at the valley, and leaving Rhea alone unsettled him. But duty was bred deep in his bones. "I'll go," he said simply. Before dawn, he saddled Daisy and left. Rhea stood in the doorway, watching until he vanished into the pale distance. The house felt too large without him. Hours passed, the fire burned low, and the wind whispered restlessly against the walls. By dusk, the snow began again, thick, relentless. When Ezra knocked on her door that night, she almost didn't answer. He looked half-frozen, his hat crusted with frost. "Couldn't make it back to town," he said. Bridge gave out. He glanced at her with something that wasn't quite a smile. "Didn't think you'd want to be alone in this." She hesitated, then stepped aside. The storm screamed louder than conscience. Inside, the warmth returned slowly, though the air between them remained taut as a wire. Ezra tried for conversation, his tone gentle but insistent. "He keeps you up here like a secret," he said, studying her. "You don't owe him your silence." Rhea turned sharply. "He gave me shelter when no one else would." "Shelter isn't the same as love," Ezra murmured. She said nothing, only moved to the fire, her hands trembling slightly. He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the snow on his coat. "You deserve more than walls and wind," he said. Outside, a branch cracked beneath the weight of snow. Rhea flinched. "You should rest," she whispered. He hesitated, eyes dark with something she didn't want to name, then nodded. But when she retreated to her room, she bolted the door and lay awake until dawn. By morning, the storm had died. She opened the door to find Ezra gone, his footprints half buried in snow. Relief came slow, mingled with guilt. She stepped outside, letting the cold sting her cheeks, praying Shwohn would return soon. He did, 3 days later, bruised and hollow-eyed, with frost crusting his beard. The search had been fruitless. 2 men dead, 1 missing. When Rhea met him at the door, her breath caught. He looked at her not as he once did, but as though afraid she'd vanish if he blinked. "You're hurt," she said, seeing the gash on his temple. "I've been worse." He smiled faintly, then paused, noticing the second cup on the table. "You had company." "Ezra," she said softly. The bridge collapsed. He couldn't reach town. His expression didn't change, but the silence that followed was heavier than before. "Didn't figure you'd open that door for anyone," he said at last. Rhea lowered her eyes. It was the storm. He nodded once, then moved past her, setting his gloves by the fire. But the distance between them had changed shape, no longer built of loneliness, but of something raw. That night, he couldn't sleep. Through the thin walls, he heard her breathing, steady and near. He closed his eyes, fighting the image of Ezra's hand near hers. By the next evening, the tension snapped. They argued, not loud, but sharp, like flint striking steel. "You think I don't see?" he said, his voice breaking its long calm. "You think I'm blind to the way he looks at you?" Rhea stood her ground, tears bright in her eyes. "And what if he does? What right have you to care?" His jaw clenched. "None," he admitted. "But that doesn't stop me." For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she turned away, whispering, "You can't guard me from the world, Shwohn." "I ain't trying to guard you," he said hoarsely. "I'm trying to keep what little good there is left." The words hung between them, trembling like a candle in the wind. Outside, thunder rolled in the mountains. Later, as the storm returned, Rhea heard hoofbeats again, distant but deliberate. She rushed to the window, her heart hammering. Through the white curtain of snow, she saw two figures at the ridge, one on horseback, one on foot, dragging something heavy through the drifts. "Shwohn," she cried. He was already reaching for his rifle, eyes narrowing. The wind carried a faint echo, Ezra's voice, shouting something lost to the storm. Shwohn stepped into the snow, the door swinging wide behind him. "Stay inside," he ordered. Rhea's breath caught as the wind swallowed him whole. The sky cracked with thunder, snow whirling like ash. And for the first time since she'd come to Clearwater Valley, she realized the wind wasn't just whispering anymore. It was warning.